Electrocast. Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Western demands.
Now this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you.
I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs!
Or Whatever Movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up and welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host Iris, and I'm here with my older brother,
Wesley, y'all.
Today, we're talking a movie from 2024, Apple original, Fly Me to the Moon.
Had we seen this movie in theaters, do you think that it would have resonated like an Apple film?
I think regardless of exhibition format, this would resonate as a Disney film.
As a Disney film?
Yep.
Interesting.
You don't think this has got Disney vibes?
Apple TV still seems to have a very sterile type.
If Apple has a play, I would say it is artist-driven. The Scorseses.
The Scarlett Johanssons producing this movie.
Exactly.
But Sofia Coppola has a distinctive voice typically as well for Apple.
Right. So they want to get into the name filmmaker game, which I get it. They produce quality films and they have a lot of visibility. And because it doesn't feel as much like a numbers game, because Apple TV Plus is such a small part of the overall Apple business, they're going for a premium, more select, more distinguished kind of game.
Sterile, robotic, efficient.
This doesn't have that same, I mean, maybe it's just the fact that it's period that I feel like it had a patina, but it didn't have that sterile feel to me.
Really?
This is the, like Sonic the Hedgehog is the alien version of the movie that makes me feel old.
Yes.
Fly Me to the Moon is like the astronaut moon version of that. This is a movie that makes me feel like I've settled into a more stable...
efficient, sterile.
Fly Me to the Moon made me feel old because I liked it, because I enjoyed it, and because it has no teeth.
It's almost as though AI sat down and said, identifying all 4 quadrants, and set it up, and it's like, we got to hit all of them, the old and the young and the drama and the comedy and the romance. That's 5 quadrants. But this was the Jerry Maguire of space movies. Jerry Maguire had sports. This one has space. And there was a lot of heart. I will say in ways that maybe, I love Apple. I have nonstop Apple products, etc. What kept this movie alive for me, quite literally, was the chemistry. Scarlett Johansson is fascinating to watch on screen in almost any role. Channing Tatum, despite his dumb face, is continually positioned as, lately as a smart, sensitive, and he definitely seems to be a very smart guy. She has a lot of charisma, and he can be stern and look stern with his haircut and stuff and be all effective and science and technicality and stuff, whereas she is more taking license and all flourish. You know what I mean? She is the no-teeth version of her Black Widow persona, where she's calculating but also seductive.
Oh, she's sassy. Scarlett is sassy in Fly Me to the Moon. and she's stomping around in her little heels, and Channing Tatum's clomping around in his sweaters. Did he get a 6-pack of those crew neck knit sweaters, by the way?
Oh, my goodness.
Or are those mock turtles?
Look, so I don't understand from a female perspective. It's said that like a shirt and tie, like a suit, is lingerie for men. Do you feel that way?
Like it's hot?
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to see a man take care of himself. I think it's fascinating that the suit is an international symbol of man. And so it's just a universally flattering design, sure.
Yeah, and Scarlett Johansson, and they're in the very Mad Men 60s, very thick clothing. It seems to be like a skirt suit or whatever that's called. And the bras were different shaped, apparently, or something. The suit is fine, but that look, that knit sweater thing with the... I don't know, what do we call them? Spousal abuse? I don't think it's the term, the spousal abuse t-shirt. Right, the one with the straps. But that
You're
thing...
trying to avoid the term wife beater?
Right. That white t-shirt look where you can see the shoulder straps and stuff under that thing and with his little nipples and it's always too tight. That is a most distasteful look. And I don't know if that's just from like my dude perspective or whatever, because it's like, oh, you know, a suit is hot. And I'm like, really? But that look, I detest it. And he wore it at least 4 times through the movie.
Oh, he had all different colors that he just rotated throughout the week. I was like, enough with the mock turtles, but Channing Tatum can kind of rock almost anything, even though he's not exactly my cup of tea. Back to your comment about this being the Jerry Maguire of space movies. Are you saying that it's a happy crappy love story? Because ever since our discussion of Jerry Maguire, available at orwhatevermovies.com or wherever you get podcasts, I've looked at it differently. I love that movie, but now I feel like the love story has a shadow looming over it. So, what exactly do you mean when you say this is the Jerry Maguire of space movies?
Oh man, my job, my role is bringing down movies that you love. What I meant more was that Jerry Maguire straddled a line. It doesn't make any of the lists for top romantic comedy. It's not on the sports movies list. It's not on the drama list. It straddles a line that's more like a chasm, the divide between comedy and drama, the divide between romantic movies like rom-coms and then, you know, like science technical type movies. It must be an uncomfortable position because, you know, we watched this movie with Kelly Ray's parents, and her dad is into space and aerospace and stuff, and obviously her mom likes more romantic movies and things, and I thought it would be perfect for, you know, have some tacos and watch Fly Me to the Moon. And the reaction was kind of divided. She laughed throughout, and he was grumbling that it's not like, hey, we don't want to promote this idea that the moon landing was fake, and some idiots out there are going to watch this movie and think that this is real.
Yeah.
Strange how divided the reaction was to this movie, and I wonder if it had trouble finding a unified audience.
This movie certainly seemed to have a point of view from a trailer perspective. The trailer made it seem like it was very much about faking the footage of the moon landing, which definitely piqued my interest, right? Is this a conspiracy theorist film? Is this a revisionist history? Are we actually going to get some insight into the whole footage conspiracy that we didn't have before? No. This is an almost entirely fictionalized account of the promotion behind the moon landing. It's really a romantic comedy with a space backdrop. It's like a fictional story with, I think one reviewer described it as having facts sprinkled in. So it's confusing in that way. The most distinctive feature of this film is Scarlett Johansson, which makes sense. She's the lead. She's the producer. So if there was a way that I would categorize this movie, it would be this is a sassy Scarlett film.
Yes, and she is loved. She tends to play strong characters. She's not a shrinking violet, and she has the full support of popularity really behind her. So it sucks, but this feels very much like a box office bomb to me.
Are you talking about from a business perspective, from a programming strategic perspective, or from a viewer's perspective?
It feels like a movie with big stars peppered with celebrities throughout. So many cameos and small roles. For people, it's like, wow, so-and-so, Colin Jost is in this movie? What is Ray Romano doing here? Woody Harrelson and stuff? Sure, it is a romantic comedy. It's also a space race drama. It's a period piece, etc. But it seems like it to me that it was constructed this way to, okay, we have to appeal to so-and-so. The inverse being that you just make a great movie that everyone loves because.
I mean, that's so much pressure to put on this film.
Sure.
If there was another way I'd characterize this film, it would be that it's kind of a holiday movie. I think this movie will find its fitting when families gather and they're like, what's a good movie that we can all watch? Safe for the kids. Something for dad. Scarlett Johansson, and people will enjoy it. And maybe there will be some momentum around it going into award season. And so maybe it's also an issue of timing. This movie was released in theaters in July. It's not a summer blockbuster. It feels much softer than that. There was something else you said. Oh. How does any movie really break through the streaming clutter? There's so many options. What do you really expect of this movie?
Well, I don't think that this movie is for young people. I mean, the space race as depicted here is 60 years ago? No, it's not. 69 was the Apollo 11 mission. But that these are adults before our generation, before us, would relate to the content and the period. I guess there's some Mad Men style modern appeal to the look and the style, the fashion, etc. But Scarlett Johansson is about 40 years old. I think Channing Tatum is a little bit over that. Not so much for the kids if they're not in Marvel movies, as they both have been now. And the adults apparently aren't going to the theaters. So it has to come down to word of mouth. This is safe and accessible. And I was like, this is perfect, like you said, for a family setting. This is one that we should rally around and put on for everyone to enjoy. And that is probably its strength.
You literally sat down with the Pecruels and ate, what did you eat? Tacos?
Yeah. Do you know how many times Coda has come around to be in my life? Also an Apple original film. Kelly's mom watches that movie a lot. I went over to Mom's house when her friend was visiting and Coda was on. Just Coda is omnipresent, I think, because it has such widespread appeal.
Basically what you're saying is, so Scarlett Johansson's like, I know that in 1984... when you're an adult, there's going to be equal rights. And basically nobody under 40 is going to get that joke.
We all laughed.
See, exactly. But that's because that joke was targeted directly at you, Kelly, and your in-laws. Can I call them that?
Yes. I wasn't even alive during the time period depicted in this movie.
Right, exactly. So what you're saying is this movie is not super relevant. But somehow positioning it in the past, a world where the biggest geopolitical concern was the space race, maybe this is just the kind of movie that we need when everything else feels like it's going to hell in a handbasket around us.
I was excited to see this movie. We talked in our discussion of The Shining about Stanley Kubrick maybe hinting that he was in fact hired to fabricate the moon landing in the event the space race didn't go our way. Danny Lloyd wears the Apollo 11 sweater. Apollo 13 is one of my favorites. As I discussed, we talked about Apollo 11, the documentary, our discussion available at orwhatevermovies. I was jazzed. This is my time period. I really like it in American history. This is, post-Kennedy and space race and all that stuff. I really like the 60s stuff. And when I learned about the premise, we're doing a romantic comedy or whatever, but also about a subject that I find fascinating, I'm totally in for this.
Okay, I was wondering about that, but I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're saying, I was excited about this, but...
Well, I found that I compared this movie to a lot of different movies. Jerry Maguire, Titanic, the backdrop being real settings, historical settings, but the focus is more on a love story. That's about where the comparison to Titanic ends. But I was like, okay, we're going to do a romantic comedy about the thing, and it's all light jazz and space race. And I'm like, I'm not sure how well this is going to work. It was either going to adhere to a romantic comedy kind of setting, and they were going to do the meet cute, which they definitely did, and they were going to be the humor humorous elements, like him getting blowed up the Martian style and stuff, and oh, that's funny or whatever. And then I thought that she was going to leave and he was going to experience the launch and then chase her in the rain and say, the only problem with today's wonderful success is that I couldn't share it with you, you know? And then it wasn't that way. And it wasn't a hardcore. I was trying to find the Act 2 drama that was going to carry us over. Was it when her past was revealed? Yeah. Was it because the launch was in question? It seemed like the whole thing was going to be shut down because of last popularity.
Well, she was bad enough because she was selling space, which Channing Tatum's character considered to be not only very challenging, but a pure effort. Then she's even worse because she's got this sordid background that we don't fully understand until later. And then on top of that, if you want to analyze this from a structural perspective, the Act 2 pinch point is she's creating fake landing footage, and it's going to dupe not only the American public, but the entire world.
And the dramatic stakes button was, after this is done, I never want to see your face again.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first, like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
Right. And she's a big baddie, and the only rub is that Channing Tatum's in love with her.
Yeah, because it was going to go well either way. Woody Harrelson was going to see to it that the American public got the moon landing that they deserved, and America deserved, however it was going to be presented.
What's his character's name in No Country for Old Men?
That is Carson Wells.
Yeah. It was so weird to see Carson Wells perform over that quirky jazz score.
Yeah.
I was like, this feels really incongruent somehow.
Yeah. Woody Harrelson is an anomaly. He did seem kind of out of place. And for a second there, I know that this isn't this kind of movie, but did he not seem in a Fight Club way sort of Tyler Durden-y? Like you never see that dude. He only interacts with Scarlett Johansson and he's like her conscience, and it's like, okay, you gotta go to at first I thought he was like Jiminy Cricket, but then because you never see, but it's not true, you do see him with other people later, but he was almost like a Men in Black version of Drop Dead Fred, where he's only seen by her and it's really her imagination and her conscience driving her to do, something that she doesn't want to do. I'm not really sure.
It's interesting. I think you got that impression because Woody Harrelson, despite his menacing presence, was all empty threats. Like there was talk about no teeth. If this movie had no teeth, it's because the Woody Harrelson character had no teeth. He was like the muscle who you knew would never implement it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, there was no real threat in the Woody Harrelson character and the Scarlett Woody dynamic because what was he going to do? He wasn't going to torture her. He wasn't going to make her disappear.
He was going to send her to prison for the rest of her life if she talked.
All right. Well, that'd be too bad.
Look, I agree. I thought the same thing going into it. If they decided that they were going to broadcast a launch, what was he going to do about it? If she was like, look, Jiminy, we're going to play the actual thing. It may work. It may not. And what's he going to do? Be like, shut the whole thing down. He would have been fine.
He would have been fine. Like, he literally was like, I'll see you in a couple days. I was like, well, that doesn't really keep the pressure on, does it?
Right. This movie was, in a way, as if the game were written by a lady. The game was all this intrigue and it's kind of folding back on itself and twisting, and it's clever in that way. But she was not a real person. She was a phantom, sort of an illusion, playing a role continuously. She was the con man, the lovable con artist or whatever. And in the end, she, they had their romantic thing, and she was like all embarrassed and says her real name. And he's like, oh, that's a good name. And then they smooch or whatever. But
this is what I'm saying.
Right. No teeth. And when you smooch, it's important that you have no teeth, that you don't use teeth.
This is what I'm saying. Kelly Helen Millie?
Not even her name,
Milford?
Winnie.
Winnie is a Disney princess. That's why this is a Disney film.
Oh, man. Apple executives and Scarlett Johansson would likely take issue with that, given that she's already been a Disney princess, or a Marvel princess anyway.
They only get the smooch, but she does get her Prince Charming. But she's also the feisty, sassy Disney princess of late, the Anna type, who's also saving the world.
Yeah, you can see how she would this role would have real appeal for her. She can act her way through a lot, just short of putting on disguises. I mean, she did have the fake pregnancy belly. And look, as a dude, she went into the thing and I was like, man, she's a seductive mom. What's happened? She's not even a mom. That's cheating a little bit. And I felt kind of cheated in a way because I should have seen through that gag. I've seen the trailers. I knew kind of what this movie was about, saw the promotional stuff. I knew she wasn't pregnant. I was like, how is this movie going to be about her balancing a kid with Channing Tatum or whatever? Oh, she's not really pregnant. And I completely fell for it. And that annoyed me more than anything.
I think men are just annoyed that instinctually they cater to a pregnant woman, which pregnant women should be catered to, don't get me wrong, but I think that it's your own instinct that you're railing against there.
I fully admit this. The point is that she had a role that I'm sure her pupils dilated and she was like, oh, I can do this. And this would be good and good for her. And she can produce it. It's like George Clooney, where the Starless Sky, Midnight Sky, is that what it was called?
Available at orwhatevermovies.com or wherever you get podcasts.
It's like, what do I want to do? I want to give George Clooney a pat on the butt. He's directing, or he's directed, he's producing, he's starring or whatever. It's not appropriate for me to even consider giving Scarlett Johansson a pat on the butt, but she's doing her thing and you can appreciate her recognition of sort of a meaty role that she can sink her teeth into. But Channing Tatum, on the other hand, it very much feels like a woman's perspective film because while he's a big galoot and I guess people find him sort of cute, his turns were a little bit weird. He's obviously smitten from the very beginning. They're meet cute. We can break down the technicality of the execution of that scene, etc. But basically he goes from hard-ass, hard-nosed NASA type to completely in love in the diner, and then back to hard, what are you doing at my work? This is, no, you get out of here. This is hard hat and everything can crush you. And he's a punk. And he was so cartoonishly resistant to her involvement. The dynamic was meant to be they love each other, they hate each other, they love each other, they hate each other. And then in the end, they're going to smooch. But he seemed very hot and cold in a way that didn't feel realistic to me. He felt more rom-com to me. Oh, you're great, but I never want to see you again once we pull this off. You don't belong here, but I can't do this without you.
I mean, he was a little harsh, but I guess I never bought it. I think I was focused on other problems with Channing Tatum's character. I mean, I just don't buy him as a launch director. I just don't buy him as a hard, calculating NASA scientist type. He didn't even try to act, period. His comedy, both physical and otherwise, was very modern. And because I knew that they were going to end up together. But that being said, was it a bad performance on Channing Tatum's part? I think I've come to accept him. That in whatever role he's in, he's going to be Channing Tatum, but Channing Tatum himself is pretty likable seeming dude.
Shockingly, he was the dance guy, like Step Up or whatever, and Magic Mike and G.I. Joe and stuff. And he's like, oh, he's a long-headed physical actor type of thing.
Plus, he's had a lot of bad press with his messy Jenna Dewan Tatum divorce.
But somebody said, or maybe it was Jonah Hill or whatever, was like, this dude is actually super smart and funny. Let's get him in 21 Jump Street, the remake of that, and subsequently 22 Jump Street. He's found his way into, the Sandra Bullock movie. What was it, The Lost City or whatever?
It was cute.
Yeah. Hateful Eight. But he seems to fit well into this role because I look at Gene Kranz, who was Ed Harris in Apollo 13, and he's kind of got that severe haircut, gruff, former military man kind of thing where he's all bitter because he had, AFib and couldn't become an astronaut. So he became a flight director instead. And he's all, he feels responsible for the tragedy of Apollo 1 and all that stuff. And I get it. And it works in that way. It's just I don't know that the screenplay necessarily treated him as quite as fairly as they definitely did for the Kelly character, the Winnie character.
I mean, this story is not trading on subtlety. It's trading on its obviousness. And I think that the 1950s archetypes, where the man is manly and the woman is curvy and the gay dude is flamboyant and...
Quietly flamboyant.
Quietly flamboyant?
Well, you can only say so much in the 50s and 60s.
Well,
this isn't Cruella, London.
Sure, but you can certainly wear whatever you want to your first day of principal photography. And so we get these characters right off the bat, and regardless of that, they're able to kind of maintain their tension throughout. I'm looking at a trailer or preview of their meet cute right now on IMDb, and I really think it was a missed opportunity for them not to do a callback to this idea of fire and alcohol not mixing, because that's essentially what they were. He was the alcohol and she was the fire. And when they come together, they burn, whether it's in conflict or in love.
Look, I agree. I mean, the meet cute had its own problems. She was dismissive and he did a dumb line and she perceived that dumb line and retorted with her own clever comment, I'm not going to roll around on the floor with you or whatever. And then he said, no, you're actually on fire. And she had a very dramatic reaction. You wouldn't think that a lady that smart would completely freak out about the fact that the candle or whatever was touching the edge of her book that she was writing in. She jumped up and then made it way worse. And then he was calm and scientific and put it out and all rational. You know what I mean? But totally, the alcohol and fire, that analogy worked well for their characters.
And maybe it was enough because I still got it. But I would have been more satisfied if they had come around. But everything else gets pretty tied up pretty neatly. Even if we introduce the fake footage concept late in the game, it does become the primary source of, not tension, it becomes the main conflict. And it's interesting. It was interesting to me that for the majority of the moon landing, I didn't know what was being broadcast. And I think that was intentional and by design until we realized that she doesn't even know. And then on top of that, we find out that it is the actual footage, which I'm assuming is in there to, avoid perpetuating the conspiracy. But it was really beside the point, because at that point, I've already bought in completely with this love story, and I'm along for the ride until the end.
I agree that the technicality of what we're looking at, is this real or is it not? Nobody knows. She didn't know. Certainly Channing Tatum didn't know, and Woody Harrelson was in the dark until the cat. And then you really understand finally which one they're looking at, and it's a relief. But it was teethless in the way that it kind of didn't matter, except for the studio purposes and him. What was he going to do about it? But when these worlds clash, is it effective? Would a dude who's all about the space and who, embraces his role in the unfortunate technical tragedy of Apollo 1, would he be all superstitious about the black cat? I was like, this is a weird gag that they keep doing. He's a man of science. They didn't take talismans to the moon, not even in the 60s. But it seemed like his role was very clear. Look, this is not about taking the camera or not. This is about the weight. We are literally weighing screws here, people. Where she's like, nah, it's going to happen. We're going to do it anyway. It was like her perspective of the moon landing. Anything is possible. Well, not technically, because a lot of things can go wrong. And in fact, it very nearly went completely wrong from a technical perspective where they weren't sure that the broadcast, which all of this was hinging on, was actually going to work. You can't just exceed the weight and not have an Apollo 1 level disaster or a Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. Everything has to be perfectly in line, and you can't just willy-nilly it, dude.
And therein lies the tension, right? Where when you corporatize and commercialize science, he has the same constraints as a rocket scientist that, it's subject to funding and financing. And how do you finance a space race? How do you finance a lunar mission? Well, through marketing. And she's got to do her job and he's got to do his job, and they got to make it work together, and that just adds fuel to their romantic fire. But does it reveal anything new to us about the lunar mission? I guess that was kind of beside the point, which makes it really just a science backdrop for a romantic film, which I think ultimately succeeds.
They sold us on the moon landing. However, they had to. Did whatever they needed to do. It just so happened that we were watching the right one, the factual one. Did they sell us, Scarlett Johansson and team, sell us on Fly Me to the Moon? Look, that launch was awesome. And you see Rod Tidwell in the big game and you're like, oh my God. And you're like all shocked and stuff. I was like, whoa, that's cool. It looked like, because look, this wasn't a massive budget movie. This wouldn't have been what Ron Howard would have directed, but it felt like it. It felt like 30-year-old Apollo 13 CG where everything was perfectly in place, and it looks perfectly real because you can cut to the 60s actual footage, which some of that may have been. They did film an actual launch in 4K while they were filming this movie on location, but it looked and felt good enough. But my concern is that this is the longest at 2 hours and 10 minutes and most expensive romantic comedy I've ever seen. And is it going to justify its larger themes with its meet cutes and clever dialogue and will they, won't they? Of course they're going to smooch. Is it enough?
But again, you're talking about business. You're not talking about if this movie functions, if it succeeds on its own merits, which I think you can't deny.
My point is, it doesn't seem terribly original, but maybe it's because they were shooting for a familiarity with the time period, the setting, the dramatic events that took place, and then putting a fairly traditional love story in the middle of it. Wag the Dog was a movie about a fictionalized war. It owes a lot to that movie. I wandered a couple of times. My mind wandered, but it's because I was inspired in a way to go off on my own tangents mentally. And then I came back and focused on the movie, and it didn't lose me. It just kind of boosted me in a way that broad, sprawling, kind of evenly paced, no bumps in the road kind of movies can do.
And your final rating is?
Yeah, I'll give it an all right rating.
Yeah, this isn't rocket science. This is a good for what it is. And because I'm old and this is easing me into a more settled stage of my life, sure. Oh, God. It's an easy good. And that's our discussion on Apple Original Fly Me to the Moon, available on Apple TV+. I hope this was a palate cleanser from Halloween 2024 at orwhatevermovies.com. Of course, if you want to check out those movies, our 4 years of Halloween program, go to orwhatevermovies.com or wherever you get podcasts. If you have a movie request for us, you can get in touch, 818-835-0473 or whatevermovies@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, heard you like podcasts. Well, check out Dollar Bets. Two sports guys with faces for radio, betting live money against each other on air. That's Dollar Bets with a Z. Find us on the Winner's Edge.
Dreaming of the perfect event or longing for a clutter-free space? I'm Stephanie with I'm with Steph, where your vision becomes a reality. From magical weddings to transformative home organizing, we bring you expertise and passion to every project. Whether you're planning a grand celebration or seeking peace through organization, we tailor our services to meet your unique needs. I'm with Steph. To explore our services and connect with me directly, visit I'mWithSteph.com. Mention Electricast for a 20% discount.
Electricast.